Ahead on 12 News, seniors in New Hope deal with a spike in their rent. It has some wondering how they'll be able to afford it.
We're seeing rents increasing and the incomes of many people not increasing.
Plus, a change in leadership as Brooklyn Park selects a new city manager. But first, an unlikely place for weighing in on the merits of medical marijuana. 12 News starts right now. Hello and thanks for joining us. The medical marijuana debate has landed smack dab in the middle of a Plymouth Planning Commission meeting.
Planning members weighed the merits of whether to allow a medical marijuana facility in the city. It led to a compelling debate, one that could spark more discussion at the next Plymouth City Council meeting. The Plymouth Planning Commission is normally a volunteer body that deals strictly with land use issues. That wasn't the case Wednesday night.
First thing in the morning, I deal with people that are addicted to these medications.
The Planning Commission weighed in on whether to prohibit the manufacturing, distribution, and testing of medical marijuana in Plymouth. Commissioner Gary Goldetsky feels that's the right step to take.
The fact that 90% of physicians in Minnesota are rejecting this is something that is significant.
Goldetsky started a pain clinic and says he sees the fallout from drug addictions every day. He believes a ban on medical marijuana facilities would enhance public safety.
I think that many states have gone down the wrong path with this. They've made a tremendous error that I think will be corrected down the road.
Other Planning Commission members weren't comfortable saying no to something that is legal in Minnesota.
There are positive uses for this in the healthcare industry, and I don't know that I feel comfortable supporting an ordinance where I'm making a healthcare decision for somebody.
There's some things that are reasonable to regulate by land use. I don't believe this is one of them.
In the end, by a 4-3 vote, the Plymouth Planning Commission did recommend the ban of medical marijuana facilities in Plymouth. None are currently located in the city. The Plymouth City Council will have the final say at its July 28th meeting. Of course, such a ban would not prevent any Plymouth resident from getting a medical marijuana prescription.
A 19-year-old Brooklyn Park man is accused of stealing credit card machines used to process payments. According to prosecutors, Michael Cole stole or tried to steal credit card machines from several retail businesses, including the Brunswick Zone bowling alley in Brooklyn Park. The charging documents say Cole gave the machines to others involved in the scheme to process fraudulent refunds. Brunswick Zone had losses totaling nearly $200,000. Prosecutors say two other co-conspirators paid Cole to carry out the crimes.
We have an update to a story now that we brought to you earlier this month involving a class action lawsuit filed against a pastor accused of carrying out an alleged Ponzi scheme. Spokesperson for Bethel World Outreach Church in Robbinsdale, where the pastor once worked, says the pastor is no longer affiliated with the church. According to a Board of Trustee official, Pastor Joseph Howard resigned his position at Bethel World Outreach Church in February of 2014. The trustee says Bethel World Outreach has no affiliation with Pastor Howard's new church or his business venture. Residents of a New Hope senior living community will soon have to start paying more for rent.
Residents at Northridge Independent Living Facility in New Hope say their rent is going up by more than 20%. As Delane Cleveland reports, it's a story that's not unique in the Twin Cities.
Along Boone Avenue in New Hope sits the sprawling campus of Northridge Independent Living. It's home to 124 apartments for adults age 55 and older. And coming September 1st, it'll cost more for those seniors to live there. $1,650 a month for a one-bedroom and $1,900 for a two-bedroom.
We're seeing rents increasing and the incomes of many people not increasing, and that certainly holds for the senior population.
Chip Hallbach is executive director of the Minnesota Housing Partnership.
If you're living off Social Security, you really can't afford more than $400 for rent, so that's way off the mark of what's being developed now.
He says that for the growing population of senior citizens, finding housing that's affordable will continue to be a problem unless the state and charities step in to help.
We're hoping that in the coming legislative session that there will be some initiatives out there that the state can get behind.
There won't be any initiatives to help lower the rent at Northridge. Apartment officials say it's a move that has to be done Refund due to rising costs associated with providing services and amenities. An all too familiar story for Minnesota's seniors that, if anything, highlights the issue that Chip Halbach wants people to acknowledge.
The sympathy is there, and now it requires the action.
In New Hope, Delane Cleveland, 12 News.
Officials from Northridge say that even with the rent increases, their rates are well below the market rate for facilities with similar amenities. Residents, meanwhile, say they're still hoping apartment management reconsiders its decision.
The city of Brooklyn Park has extended an offer to a Minneapolis employee for the city manager position. The deputy city coordinator for the city of Minneapolis, Jay Strobel, accepted the job and contract negotiations are underway. 12 News reporter Shannon Slatton has more.
The Brooklyn Park's a great community.
An optimistic Jay Strobel mixed with Brooklyn Park City residents earlier this week, one of 3 finalists vying for the vacant position of city manager.
Obviously, tonight's a testimony to how engaged the community is in the decision of their next city manager, and so I look forward to working with the community if selected.
The city council and a city leadership committee selected Strobel for the job in a process Mayor Jeff Lundy calls very deliberate.
One thing he's going to bring is some really more operational experience. He really talks about results management, which is performance metrics, so we can start to look at how our city, make sure taxpayer money is used and get it used correctly.
Strobel holds degrees from the University of Minnesota and St. Olaf College. He has worked for the state of Minnesota in a variety of planning and performance management positions. But since 2005, he's worked for the city of Minneapolis.
That was one of the key questions that I think he did really well was, we want your experience, but we don't necessarily want everything that Minneapolis does, because we're not Minneapolis. And he answered the question. And so I think that was one of our concerns was, are we just going to become Minneapolis light? And we don't want that.
In Minneapolis, Strobel worked with a very diverse population. At the event earlier this week, Strobel says he hopes to engage every sector of Brooklyn Park.
Poverty is a situation that I know is pretty significant and prevalent in a lot of suburbs these days, and we all have to figure out ways of working with the community, working with the residents, of trying to figure out how to create ladders of opportunity to get out of poverty.
After the selection on Wednesday, Strobel left for vacation in Wisconsin, and now the city moves into the contract negotiation phase. And Mike and Alex, Mayor Lundy says ideally Strobel's first day on the job will be sometime toward the beginning of September.
All right.
Thank
New
you.
face. Thanks a lot, Shannon.
An organization that works to connect people with human services in the Northwest Metro has lost 2 of its member cities. In the past month, Maple Grove and Crystal have pulled out of the Northwest Hennepin Human Services Council. One Crystal council member says there are other ways to make human services connections, and it's not a good financial decision for Crystal to remain a member, but another says it will be a loss.
I know that there's increasing poverty and immigrants and people that need these kinds of services, the services that they bring to our community, and I think it is just really unfortunate that we're pulling out.
One Northwest Hennepin Human Services board member says the organization is looking for new funding and possibly shifting its focus to workforce training. Cities of Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center, Corcoran, New Hope, and Osseo are still members. Well, coming up, what a Plymouth couple says is key to a good garden.
And then a little bit later in sports, it's midsummer, and Terry Tuma has a helpful tip that will lure fish to your baits.
But first, more midsummer heat. Friday, dew points rise. Temperatures approach 90 degrees.
There is nothing like fresh vegetables and fruits out of the garden.
Right, and today a Plymouth couple gives us the real dirt on growing organically. Reporter Sonia Goins goes in the garden to show us their environmentally friendly garden.
Well, it's good exercise and it's pretty and I just love being outside.
Barb and Roy Heinrich have been gardening for more than 40 years.
The garden has gone crazy this year. It's very happy.
They spend at least an hour each day in the garden.
He does the heavy stuff.
Then she just says, get the shovel, and she'll point, and that's where I dig.
They say organic is the way to go.
Yeah, I don't put anything on my vegetables. I like to have more natural, native plants.
Their backyard retreat features many different vegetables, fruits, and flowers.
A row of beans, beet, a row of carrots, kohlrabi, second planting of green beans, Brussels sprouts, the peppers.
They say the key to a good garden is good soil. They have 2 compost bins for fertilizer.
What you try to do is you try to layer it with brown material, green material, and build up layers. And when you start out, the bin is full. And as the nature does its thing, it goes down, and you end up with about a half a bin.
To keep invasive insects like the Japanese beetle off their plants,
They don't fly well, so you just go like this, and they drop into the bucket.
they use plain old soap and water.
Rather than using poison and that.
3 apple trees are in the center of the garden. They say pruning will reap bigger, better fruit.
In clusters like this, we'll take the 2 cripples out to allow these to do better.
The Heinrichs also have a cherry tree that's hardy for Minnesota.
I picked over a 5-gallon bucket full off of that tree.
They say the best part of growing a garden is reaping the fruits of your labor.
They turn into pie, and that takes care of a lot of problems, is a good big piece of pie.
And of course, sharing your bounty with your family and friends.
Whoever answers the door gets a handful, you know.
For In the Garden, Sonia Goins, 12 News.
The couple says the easiest vegetables to plant are beets. Roy says you can pretty much ignore them until they're ready in the late summer or early fall.
Got quite the garden there. Quite the characters,
They're
right?
great, aren't they? Well, coming up, kids in Brooklyn Park find something that truly floats their boat.
But first, a former All-State basketball player is back at his alma mater, this time as the head coach. John Jacobson has that and more when we come back with sports.
John Jacobson with sports now. Pretty neat when you can come back and coach at your own old school.
Right. And hoping to bring their team back to the level that they were at when he was playing not so long ago. Not so long ago it was that Marcus Hill was one of the top high school basketball players in the area. And now the Brooklyn Park native is taking over as head coach at his alma mater, Breck. Hill is using the summer to get to know his players better and work with them on skill development. He graduated from Breck in 2007 and led the Mustangs to a state class AA runner-up finish as a junior. He played in college at Minnesota State Mankato and had stints in the NBA Development League and in Mexico. I was excited for this chance.
Honestly, it's a dream come true. To come back to my school where I played, I graduated from, and I had a lot of success when I was here as a player. And coming here as a coach, I mean, it's obviously a dream come true. I finished playing professional basketball last couple of years and decided what I was going to do after basketball. And the first thing that came to my mind was to coach.
Marcus is using the summer to get to know his players better and work with them on skill development. He graduated from Breck in 2007, and he was an assistant last year, working with 2 veteran coaches in Rick Webb and Bob Erdman. Now at 26 years old, he is taking the reins.
I had to learn a lot, and I had to learn quickly. I had a great coaching staff with Coach Webb and Coach Erdman, Hall of Fame coach, and for them to take me under their wing and show me things and guide me, and now that I'm kind of taking over the program, it's one of those things that it's just a dream come true, and I just want to take full advantage of this opportunity and want to thank Breck for giving me this opportunity at such a young age, being a young coach.
Hill has been teaching in the Anoka-Hennepin district, but hopes to teach at Breck in the future. A Maple Grove woman and Wayzata High School graduate has qualified for another big golf tournament. 19-year-old Sarah Burnham is headed to next month's U.S. Women's Amateur Tournament. Burnham was one of 4 women to qualify from sectional qualifying at the White Bear Lake Yacht Club course. The Michigan State sophomore-to-be played in the U.S. Women's Open last week in Pennsylvania. She also qualified for the U.S. Am last year. The tournament is the week of August 10th in Portland, Oregon. Pool play continued at the USA Cup Youth Soccer Tournament today. Boys U19 Gold, Fusion SC of Plymouth facing the Maplebrook Blast. Penalty kick for Fusion early in the game. Ben Zaver nails it for a 1-0 lead. The Blast answers as Matthew Murakami slips but still gets off the shot and scores to tie it up. But Fusion gets 2 more goals in the half. Pretty play here as Benjamin Nelson finishes, and Fusion wins 3-2. U16 Girls Gold Division play. Minnesota Thunder Academy of New Hope against the Ottawa Nationals, and it's all Maple Leafs in this game. Selena D'Alessandro scoring on the header goal off the corner kick for a 2-0 lead. Then Caroline Osseo wins the race to the ball and scores to make it 3-0. That's the final as MTA is shut out. USA Cup playoffs start Friday and conclude on Saturday. Time again to drop a line in the water with Terry Tuma as he offers up some tips on catching crappies. Here's this week's Channel 12 fishing tip.
Summer crappies, slab crappies we're talking about, are catchable throughout that open water season. So often we think, well, they just don't bite. That is not true. The biggest ingredient here is that we're not looking in the right spots. Some of the deep green weed edges can be very productive. Rock piles, humps inside brake line turns. They can also roam a basin and in search of food source. Always remember, crappies and food go hand in hand. If you got aggressive fish, then, and most of the time we're not going to see real aggressive fish, but if we do have, then using a jig spin such as a tadpole spin, and here you can either pinch the tail off and use a minnow, or just cast and troll it. Trolling works extremely well, sort of in search of the size of these crappies. Now, if you got neutral fish, most of the time, it's going to be a jig and a minnow, possibly using a power grub, and then I do like preferably tube jigs and hair jigs, and again, tipped with minnows under these kind of conditions for a neutral fish, and then working those specific locations. Again, either cast to or you can drift in these areas or use your trolling motor. The biggest factor here is if you find a school of crappies, they don't always school, by the way, is always start on the top side or the outside edges. Do not start in the center, but you're going to spook these fish. If you got a tough bite fish, then a plain jig itself is going to be very, very productive, tipped with a minnow, obviously, or using float system with a hook and a bead, I prefer, cast into those specific locations. If you find concentrated fish, very concentrated, then use a bobber system. Give crappie fishing a try throughout the summertime. You'll be very, very impressed with the success you'll have.
All right, thanks, Terry, and that's it for sports today.
Thanks, John. Still ahead, a big project that will take on the mighty Mississippi.
Kids in Brooklyn Park try their hand at building a boat. We'll be right back. And finally, some area kids are finding out what it takes to build a rowboat with their own hands.
Okay, so what we're doing is we're locking in our sliding T-bevel so we know exactly what angle we want. Does that make sense?
Teens and younger kids from the Zanewood Recreation Center in Brooklyn Park are making progress on building a pine and walnut rowboat through a program called Urban Boat Builders. More than 50 kids are working on the project each week, learning how to build the boat, but also building camaraderie, leadership skills, and learning the value of teamwork.
I'm the muscle here. So, yeah, it's really fun, so I'm learning a lot.
The first day we brought the little kids in, and they didn't really want to show up at first, and then by the end of the day they didn't want to leave, they want to come back all the time. When are we going to take the boat out?
The boat and the oars should be finished by the end of August. Once it's complete, the staff at Zanewood Recreation Center hopes to take the kids out on the Mississippi River. Their plan is to go over by the Coon Rapids Dam and take that
would be
boat
fun.
out, so it'd be neat to see that happen.